In today's video, we are going to show you how to use the BendTech software so that you can end up drawing your drift trike, mini bike, go-kart, whatever it might be. We're going to do a drift trike example today, but it's all the same steps and procedures as you would for any other tube chassis project. Step one is down to basics. Even though we still have our fancy BendTech software that makes everything just a lot easier, this is where we will always start. We're gonna do a hand-drawn blueprint where we come up with some of our dimensions. And from that, we will take it to our BendTech software and draw up our drift trike frame. Now, what you need to understand is when you're finding your measurements for our hand-drawn blueprint, we're going to be doing it kind of in a unique way. This is the best way I've found that kind of just makes sense when we're finding our dimensions, and it all comes back to the BendTech software. Now, this TriStar, whatever we want to call it, this is how we're going to plug in our dimensions for the BendTech software, but we've got to get our real life measurements before we even get to this step. Otherwise, we're just guessing. And the best way I've found for this to make sense is this TriStar. This is, if you want to just play pretend, this is where your butt's going on your frame. This is where your butt cheeks are sitting. Every other measurement is coming off of that location. And I'll show you what I mean and how I want you to go through and get your first initial dimensions after you've drawn your hand-drawn blueprint. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. I am no artist, but I've got a little top-down view of this trike and a side view. Now, we don't need this to look professional or exact. I mean, do as best as you can, but we're just trying to make the dimensions up as we go, but we need a reference point as far as what you want your build to look like. For a drift trike, one thing to have for sure with you or know of is your donor head tube and front fork assembly. If you're gonna buy your own, like my student did for his drift trike, you'll be able to look up the dimensions and figure out how tall that front fork assembly is from the ground to the center of your head tube. If you're cutting up an old BMX bike or a mountain bike or whatever, we need to know the dimensions from here to here before we get going. Otherwise, you can make your up tubes too long and your frame will be dragging on the ground. We don't want that. So let's get in it. Step one, when we start this process, is I want you to get into position with a tape measure. All right, we're gonna pretend you're riding your mini bike or your go-kart or what have you, and we're gonna take some measurements. What we'll do is we will set this tape measure up against the wall, and that will be our backrest, and we will work off of there to find the distance from here to where we want our head tubes to start going up, from here to where we want our foot pegs. Because remember, like I said, that star, that pick point, that TriStar, whatever you want to call it, that's where our cheeks are going to be, and that's where we're going to pull all of our measurements from. Okay, the easiest way to think of this is just a fancy 3D connect the dot puzzle game thing. It's really not as complicated as it seems. It can be intimidating, but it's really pretty easy. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set this tape measure up, put it up against the wall, and I'm going to get down in position just like I was going to be riding my drift trike, right? I'm gonna get where my legs feel comfortable. They're not too stretched out, I mean, unless that's what you wanted. get it up like here, and I'm gonna take and figure out my measurement from about where my heel is, and that looks like, oh, let's say 39 inches. So I know that from this point here, my star, from here to my foot peg is gonna be 39 inches. Okay, we know that from here, so we could put this in here is 39 inches. All right, now we need to figure out the width of our drift trike. All right, so you're gonna get back down in your pretend spot, and what I'd like you to do is maybe kind of get a rough measurement of your cheeks, figure out how wide you are. Looks like 19. And if I want my drift trike frame to be, I guess 36 inches is a pretty good guess there. So I want my drift trike frame to be 36 inches, and then I have my 6-inch wide tires out on the side of that. So 36 inches, let's go put that in. Now I know that the width of my frame, I want to make it 36 inches wide. So now I know right there is going to be 36 inches wide. Now, the next part is I want to figure out from my seat how far forward I want my head tubes to start traveling up. So we'll move this back this way. And this is the same if you are doing a mini bike frame. What I'll have kids do is I'll have them sit in a chair and get down in that position to kind of figure out about the size that they want. So I want my frame to start going up, let's say, maybe, well, let's do 24 inches, that's easy. 24 inches is where I want my frame to start going up. And then while I've got this here, I'm going to figure out how tall I want my head tube to sit at. And this feels about right. Get in the position like you're really riding it. And, well, now let's just do 24 and 48. That's easy. So, hop back up. We know from our seat to where we want it to start bending, that's going to be 24 inches. And in total, this is going to be 48 inches until here. That's this point. All right, now we know our width. We know our length from where we're sitting to where we want the tube to go up. We know where we want it to start bending. This portion in here, that could be just, I would say 5 inches or so, maybe less, 4 inches. But this is where our two tubes are gonna make the bend inward to our head tube. The next thing we've got to figure out is from our seat back to the back of our frame. Now, the best way I've figured this out is for our drift trikes especially. So we need enough room for our motor and our axle and sprocket assembly to all fit behind us. We don't want a crazy long drift trike. The longer they are, the less of a tight 360 you can do. But for this, and this would be different for your mini bike, what we're gonna do is we'll just measure a 212 gas tank, figure out its total length from front to back of the motor, And we're gonna add a little bit of room for things behind our back so we're not resting against it. So let's go find us a motor in the shop. All right, this is the Predator 212. This is what we use most often in our Expo for our dragsters, our drift trikes, our go-karts. These are really, really good engines. It looks like we are about 15 inches on the stock setup with the gas tank, the air filter. So we are 15. And while I'm here, I'll just take some measurements to kind of figure out. This is what you would do for your mini bike frame, is you need to know how big this motor is so that the frame you build will actually fit this motor inside of it. So we're 13 inches tall, 15 inches long, and about 12, 13 inches wide. And those are the measurements we would need for our drift trike and our mini bike frames. Now, if you were to strip this down, take the tank off, do your own exhaust, whatever, then you're gonna measure and get a little bit different measurements when you go do that. All right. Now, this example drift trike that I've got here, as reference, this was a student of mine who's graduated, Bridger Penrod, and I like this setup because the motor's on the back, which you can use the weight to kind of swing around for 360s and whatnot, but the axle is closer forward to the front tire, which again, like I said, gives you that tighter 360 that you're wanting to do with these drift trikes. So from the back of his seat, he's given himself from the front of that motor about 9 inches. And like I said, that motor was 15 inches or so. And he's got this plate to have it slide for the chain tension. So that's about where we're at. So let's add in total from our seat back, he's about 15 inches total there. The bottom of those motors are smaller. They're about 6 inches in the base, and they kind of taper off one way, and that's how we're able to fit this axle so close to it, but also it's clearing the axle. It's taller than this spot here. So on our rough draft blueprint, let's add at least 15 inches for that. We could round it up to 18. So we're gonna go from the center here, this way, 18 inches to back of our frame. All right, now that we've got this rough draft with some dimensions on it, now we're gonna go right into the software itself and teach you how to take this and get your actual blueprint from your hand-drawn stuff.